Good afternoon and welcome in once again to Interrupting Racism. I'm Brian Prawitz, your host, and this afternoon we're going to have another conversation that I hope puts some civil discourse, some information, some understanding, some respect, I guess on some levels, love back out there into the this interesting ecosystem, this petri dish that we're living in right now that seems to be so divided and so difficult to have good conversations around. And it's my pleasure and honor to be the person at the mic for this program. Interrupting Racism is a gift of ALF Oregon, the American Leadership Forum of Oregon. You'll hear a lot probably about that as our conversation takes place today. But we're glad that you're here. We hope that you share these episodes, whether you find us on YouTube and you want to share them with your friends, or make comments on Facebook, which, by the way, on either Facebook or YouTube, we can see your comments as you make them, and it could maybe give us another thread to follow as we work through our conversation here today. We want to welcome to the program Marcus Mundy. Marcus is the Executive Director of the Coalition of Communities of Color. How are you, Marcus?
I'm hanging in there. Good to see you.
Happy between the holidays.
It's one long holiday for me. No between. I'm celebrating every day.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time. And, one of the most fun things for me on this project is getting introduced to new people, having conversations with folks that I probably wouldn't have the opportunity to talk to if it wasn't for things like just calling up and asking a fellow ALF senior fellow whether they would like to come on the program or not. And so one thing you and I have in common is that we both did go through ALF, and it's been a life-changing event for me. And I could probably go through a long bio for you, but what would a relatively short bio be for you if you were to self-describe Marcus Mundy?
I'm a fourth-generation college graduate. I am a father of four. I am a transplanted Oregonian, been here about 20 years. I am old enough to have seen a lot of stuff and know better about a lot of stuff. Not particularly smart. I've just had enough experience to know not to do all the wrong things. And I come from a business background, a for-profit background, but for the last decade or more, I've been deeply involved in nonprofit, particularly culturally specific nonprofits, but that's where my heart lies, and that's why I'm doing the work I do right now.
I usually see if I would have gone through and given the bio for you, I would have hit on a whole bunch of other things. It's a lot more, it's a lot less LinkedIn and a lot more human when you say it that way. And I've enjoyed getting to know you a little bit and the nonprofits you operate right now, Coalition of Communities of Color. Now, when we talked on the phone and I said, how do you describe that? It was like 20 minutes. I mean, the stuff you cover almost it was remarkable. So while we do have, like an hour, what would a somewhat of a nutshell be? I don't know if it's even possible. How do you describe Coalition of Communities of Color in a nutshell? Or can you?
Yeah, I can. I mean, we're a 19-member, culturally specific focused organization. So we have 19 nonprofit members, and they traverse different populations, ethnic populations, African immigrants, African Americans, Latino Americans, Native Americans, Asian and Pacific Islanders. And I always add this last because we also include the Slavic population. We do have a Muslim Educational Trust as a member, so we have a variety of different focused organizations, but they're all culturally specific. And the reason we came together 20 years ago, 19 years ago, we're coming up on our 20th anniversary, was because most of us were in the social services, education, jobs, employment, but supporting communities through these social programs. And we would go to the same people for funding. We'd go to the cities and the counties and the state, and we'd often compete for this little narrow slice that back then, and even now, the governments would carve out for communities of color. Well, after conflicting with each other for years, we decided, what if we worked together and went for larger pieces of the pie collectively because we served essentially the same needs, whether it was language challenges or immigration challenges or just access to the systemic opportunities that others were receiving that we weren't. So they came together. I wasn't a member yet, and it's worked out for the last 20 years where we've had wins and successes. But in that time, we've gone from no staff to an executive director to now we have about 10 staff. We have a leadership development program, a very robust research program where we do our own research on disaggregating data, decolonizing data, disparity data across populations, across jurisdictions. And we also have an environmental justice program, and we have an advocacy program which focuses on advocating for the policies and processes that benefit communities of color.
Like I said, you guys are in all kinds of places, and any of those probably would be worthy of a long discussion because of the challenges that that you are taking on head on. So many things. I mean, even just the research side of that is significant to me, and might for people who are maybe more in my network, who may or may not have a lot of experience in conversations around what communities of color, what those challenges are, because there are perceptions of what the challenges are, and then there's the reality of what they are. Just touch on just a little bit there, and this is definitely off script. I'm not sure I could have told you I was going to ask you this question, but why is it important that you have your own data and research?
Well, it is critical that we have our own data and research because as we learn from the history books, as we learn from living in America, living in the world, whoever tells the story has the benefit of telling it in the way they want. And we've learned from the last few years, there's people that promote alternative facts, or today I just heard something, alternative electors. Well, we wanted to peel it away and disaggregate the data. The reason we have to tell our own stories is because we have what's called an equity lens. We look at it from our perspective. There's no better expert on a person's experience than that person. Same for groups, same for ethnic breakouts, or however you want to break it out. So by telling our story from our perspective, it's not a story. It is actually saying, you can look at one set of data. Like we put on these reports. A decade ago, we did the unsettling profile in Multnomah County by the 6 different groups, that culturally specific groups that that are part of us. And just 2 years ago, we finished a report in Washington County on the same 6 groups, with things like jobs, education, healthcare, housing, all of those factors. The factors that matter in life to you and to me. And then we're about to do that in Clackamas County. But why it is important is that when you look at it from people that are being studied, not as objects of study, but as participants, you find out things that you wouldn't otherwise. For example, if you look at one set of data, and this happened in one of our Washington County jurisdictions, you look at one set of data and said, oh, in this city, there's no difference between the times police stop people of color and police stop the majority population. But then you look underneath the data, because we do something called community-based participatory research. We talk to people in the community in our focus groups. We talk to them before we begin our study. We get the results of our study from the same places that all the researchers get their results. And then we go back to them with those results, with our analysis. And what we found was when we sat down with the groups in this community, the police were stopping them at a disproportionate rate, but the police weren't filling out the mandatory, what ethnicity is this person? Did you ask them? Or did they have a language difficulty? There's things you can fill out on the police form which make a more robust and complete record. And so what we found when we talked to the community, they said, are you crazy? They are stopping us all the time. They will always stop us. And so it turned from anecdotal data into real data that we used to push policy. We took that to the county and that city's commissioners. They made a change where the police had to then fill out these forms completely. There was no data in the old form to pull down. This way, by telling our story and making sure that the data got filled out, we had a fuller picture of what was going on in that city. So that's just a little teeny tiny thing, but extrapolate that to all the data that gets accumulated for all of our communities, and you'll understand why when people say institutional or systemic problems, it's built into the system, these absences, and it's our responsibility to call that out.
We'll come back to some policy conversation in a little while, but I want to stay on this for just a second.
Sure.
Information is power. Data sometimes can be manipulated a certain way to have the outcome sometimes that you want. I can hear people saying in my head. But also, isn't it so true that depending on who's asking the question, you probably get a different answer, or the way that the question is asked? I mean, if you take the census, for instance, and if you had somebody who looks like me going into a Latinx population asking census questions or knocking on the door, wow, you're going to get a different response probably than if a Black or brown person might be doing the same thing. Am I on the right track here? I mean, how important is it that the community that's being asked the questions possibly has somebody who looks like them in order to build some kind of trust, which builds accuracy, which probably builds the credibility factor, I guess, of information or data or poll taking or what you were talking about.
Brian, you're absolutely right. And in fact, I was one of the co-chairs on the Complete Count census group this year. We do have our hands in a few things, but one thing that made Oregon's census collection this year so successful, it was over 98, 99% of the people in the state were counted, was the fact that there was a deliberate effort to engage community-based organizations into the process. So you had people that were recruited and trained as census takers that went out into the community, just as you said. They were already trusted organizations and individuals, so they got fuller counts. They got the door open when they showed up. They provided assistance to people. And see, what people often forget is like, oh, you're just counting those people and you're advantaging them. By having a complete count in the census in the state of Oregon this year, there will likely be a redistribution of national resources, and we will likely gain a new congressional seat if things fall out the way they're supposed to. And that is because we are counting all the people on the reservations, all the people in these communities, these agricultural communities, the rural communities, in addition to the urban communities. They're counting all these people. And despite the national push not to include undocumented people, it matters because you have to count the undocumented people. That's in the Constitution. But beyond that, it only makes sense if you have to be the county that it supports 1,400 homeless people and 1,000 of them are undocumented, and you don't count them, you won't get the federal resources to do what you need to do in your county. So we have to stop fighting against logic and reality and say, what is good for the state of Oregon? And that's what we tried to do with the Complete Count group. So.
That's really interesting. I haven't followed the census results or the success fail rate of census counting, but certainly in where I'm at, which is in Douglas County, we have an incredible rural presence here. Obviously, we are rural, but if you get outside even of Roseburg, you get into some very rural places. You get into places where people are literally living there because they don't want government interference, and certainly we have a lot of that as well. And so it's interesting also, of course, how politicized the census becomes and the discussions around that as well, because, yeah, it would potentially benefit communities of color to have an accurate count. And then some people see that as a threat, and it becomes its own conversation sometimes just around the census and the results. But yeah, it would seem like most people would say, yeah, we want to know who's in the community. We want to know what the numbers are. We want to be able to accurately reflect the services and the funding that we would need from federal and state governments. And so why that's a threat, I don't always know.
Look, I don't want the governor or governments particularly deep in my business either, but those roads are government roads. The county sheriff is a government sheriff. The lighting or broadband cable or anything like that, if we're not counted as residents of this state, we are not going to get our fair share that our national taxes paid for, our federal taxes paid for. We're not going to get it unless we stand up and are counted. So again, Oregon, please don't cut off your nose to spite your face.
Let's talk about policy change. So you mentioned earlier, police, for instance, in your example with the data and research that you've collected. But let's talk about policy change, because you talked about basically, and you please put it back into the correct phrasing, but you talk about the effort that Coalition of Communities of Color is working on to teach advocates and sort of grow leaders and leadership in order for there to be policy change. First of all, how would you describe that, so that in case I've mischaracterized that?
You said it right. About 10 years ago, we got some funding to create a leadership development program. And what that allowed us to do was create a model for these 6 different culturally specific culturally specific members of the coalition. So we have one for Latinx called Unidos. We have one for Asian and Pacific Islanders called a PICLE. One for Native Americans called LEAD, and straight down the line. But these were leadership programs. They were taught operations and administration and how to be a good strategic thinker, but they were also taught culturally specific norms for leader. How you become a strong leader in the Native American population is a little different than how you become a strong leader in the Asian and Pacific Islander or the Latinx community, because they have different cultural norms, social norms, historical norms. And so you would have instructors that looked like them, situations that were situations they were familiar with, and that developed their training. And over time, we have trained about 500 people over the last 10 years in those 6 different culturally specific programs. And it's important because those people, many of whom are actually ALF members, American Leadership Forum members, but those people have developed into better, stronger leaders themselves. They were given the tools, and they also feed back into us. Some come back and lecture, some come back and participate in the programming, some are keynote speakers, but you create your own set of leaders. And so you don't have to follow the same norms, and this is the way to do things. There's other pathways. There's more than one way to skin a cat, and I hope there's not animal rights people. I'm sorry, but there's more than one way to get to the right answer.
Sure. And a lot of that is aimed at policy change, right? So we've touched on systemic issues that we have in society, that systemic racism, equality, and a lot of things, the big terms that we hear kicked around right now. For those that are in the conversation, I will say. So let's talk about policy change. So the reason I want to touch on that is because when you say policy change, I can hear people saying, why do we need to change policies? That sounds like defunding the police. I mean, I could just hear that's the top one in my mind. It's a little bit of a threat, I think, to some people when they start hearing people talk about policy change. But it is so important to the work that you're doing, and so important to so many people that I know. So I want to try to get an illustration of what exactly that means. So the next time somebody hears that and they get defensive, they understand why it's so important and what kinds of goals that there might potentially be. So policy change in general. So I'm trying to get to a question for you. How should people see policy change when they hear somebody saying, hey, we need to change some policies here? What does that look like?
Oh, that looks like a lot of things to me. I mean, but the first thing I would ask people to do is just, what kind of changes would they like to see that affects their own lives? They want good housing. They want good education for their kids. They want good health care and access to it. They want to be able to get a job. They want to be able to not be unrealistically browbeaten by police. They want all the same things. That's the starting place. So when people think about policy change, they should first think about, what do I want for my life and that of my family? So that's where we begin. That's where everybody begins. But then when you look at, why do the policies have to change? Let me tell you, when I grew up, I used to watch Father Knows Best and Ozzie and Harriet and Gilligan's Isle. None of those had too many Black people in there, and none of those were my reality. you know? And so the world has changed. America's demographics has changed since then. And so it's like, well, when we're talking about policy change, we're talking about changing policies that give an undue advantage to anyone just by dint of their skin or their white maleness or their white femaleness. You know, it's like, well, how can we level the playing field? And sometimes we can do it just by asking questions. There's a couple of local jurisdictions here that now use a racial equity framework when they're looking at problems. So, for example, if they're thinking about building a big transportation initiative that's going to affect all the roads and byways in a certain part of the Portland metropolitan statistical area, they'll say, well, what is the financial impact? Everybody does that. What is the environmental impact? Everybody does that now. But if they ask themselves, what is the racial impact? Are we disproportionately making people move while the construction's going on that are low income or historically disadvantaged or people of color? Are we building a manufacturing plant, even out in rural places, where the effluence and the overflow creates a toxic waste right next to low income housing? That has a disproportionate racial impact. So sometimes the question when they ask it is like, no, it doesn't have a disproportionate impact. That's good. Carry on, have the project. But if it does, and you're disadvantaging a whole set of people just because they're low income or live on a reservation or live in agricultural housing down south because they're working on picking the crops, then that's not right. And you have to reflect that in your decision making and what policies you write. And that's what we try to get people to think about. It's not like, oh, you should get some kind of special exception because you want something extra. I don't think it's extra to ask that you don't, put toxins right next to where my kids are playing. I don't think it's extra to say, wow, 90% of the people that had to move their housing were Latinx people or Native American people. That doesn't seem untoward to me to say, what kind of things can we ask on the front end? And sometimes you can make a different decision that doesn't cost you more, that doesn't deleteriously affect those people of color, and you can still get your goals while being sensitive to those things. Sometimes it will cost you more, but many times it won't. It's just asking the question and then responding to it.
Yeah, and I'm a city councilor, so I deal with this a little bit, not as much as some people do, but just to me, it's literally going through that and asking those questions, I think. And I'm sure you would agree that the more questions that get asked, the more perspectives that are brought to the table, to protect variety of, to protect, let's just say, diversity in general, or I think it comes back to the root concept of diversity is a good thing. Protecting people's rights and listening to more perspectives is a good thing. And if there's maybe one shift that you'd like to see, I suppose it would be more questions, more conversations around this, more acceptance of that philosophy just by itself. And then I can see why you would invest in young people coming up, so that they would know how to ask those questions correctly and they would know how to go through the process in order to get the conversation started. Sometimes it's a win, even if it's a baby step, to even just have the conversation in the process. Would you agree?
I would agree with that. And again, not every bad decision or systemic institutional problem was built on malevolence. It's not always bad intent. They just don't know to ask the question. So you've got to entrench and make routine that you're always asking those questions, always surfacing those questions. And you're right. And you'll get a better product. Most of the Fortune 500 companies, only a handful of which are in Oregon, but the most diverse companies on that list are also the most profitable. That's been documented. Don't take my word for it. Harvard Business Review, McKinsey & Company, whatever. There are lots and lots of studies out there reaffirming the fact that by having that diversity of thought and opinion and experience, the companies do better.
So and then I want to talk about police funding. It's the poster child of this conversation, in my opinion, right now. And we see it all the time. And it's been weaponized. It's been hijacked. The conversation around defunding or unfunding or changing the funding of police has just become this hot button thing that is unbelievable. And I just got done having an incredible conversation with a very good friend of mine in Portland who we were talking about the layers, the intricate layers when it comes to police funding and mental health funding. So you have police at the city level or maybe county, but mental health is at the state. And there's all kinds of issues with funding. And if you tried to put some mental health help out there for police departments, just the complexity of the entire conversation. But instead of even getting into that detail, that phrase has gripped everybody. And immediately there's this visceral reaction to this theory. And I like talking about this this idea, and it has nothing to do with my relative support for police or not. I think it's just being able to have the conversation about what it is, to me right now feels extremely valuable. And I'd like to kind of dive into that with you just a little bit on you talk about policy change. I think that may be one that we hear a lot about. First of all, your response to the way this idea has sort of been, not sort of, it's been totally hijacked. Have you been able to have a logical conversation with somebody who is on the other side of this conversation around how we can help our police?
I've had a couple of those conversations. I'm actually part of a group called Building Bridges, and so it's with all our regional DAs and regional sheriffs and the U.S. Attorney's Office, and so some of those conversations have been productive, and some have been you hit a wall and you agree to disagree. But the thing about defund the police and those kind of things, we're living in a soundbite world, and that always distresses me because, just because you can chant it doesn't mean that is the full discussion, but we're living in this, 3-syllable world: defund the police, build the wall, steal the vote, whatever, stop the steal, whatever we have. Those sound bites mean nothing to me. Every discussion is nuanced. So defund the police, the many discussions I've had, even many of the fruitful ones, most people understand that it's more than just, we're going to take a bunch of money from the police, and when you call, no one's going to show up. That's nonsense. And even some of the people saying that's what's going to happen know it's nonsense. So let's start there. Stop the BS and say, what is it really? It is a nuanced discussion, as you said, about taking whatever money we have for the police. And you have even heard from the police themselves. We're doing too much. We can't be babysitters and homeless counselors and, mental health counselors when we go out on a call. We're doing too many domestic this and that. So when you peel it all the way and you do a process study of how the police are spending their time and what dollars go to that, that's the part of the discussion where you say, you know what, we can have a better result if we spend more on mental health or have a ride along, which, I hope you do mention some of the stuff you're doing in Roseburg on that, or the Cahoots model down in Eugene. But there's ways where you can take the same dollars, and that's for mental health. That's for this poor homeless population who doesn't know how to get themselves out of that. And we can put some resources to that. And the rest is on contemporary, community, what other policing. Because I got to tell you, most people, when they call 911 because there's an intruder at their door, they also want the police to show up. They are not saying, get rid of all police at all times. They have no purpose. There is a purpose. And even though we also know that a lot of these police departments grew way, way back out of slavery and the slave catcher model, and that kind of morphed into this version we have now, even though all of that is true, people want safety and security for their family, but they also want the best use of resources. And by having some of the resources be divested from the police and reinvested into high efficiency uses in the community, that's what most people are talking about when they say defund the police.
Yeah, and I think the conversation almost stops when you say take money away from the police and then put money over here. That's when it's like, okay, now wait a second here. Now hold on. And I understand that totally. I mean, I want to see our law enforcement supported to the maximum that it can be supported. Love to see it be as efficient as it could possibly be. And yeah, they're in Roseburg, we've got a homeless problem that is gobbling up hours and hours of time. And I know it's exponentially larger in the big cities in our area. And we are strapped with COVID restrictions. And there are all kinds of things that honestly, the people in the community who want to see something done about the tents that are growing along Interstate 5, they're screaming and yelling for the city or the county to do something about it. And no matter how fast we move, it's not fast enough. I totally understand that. But there's helping those people to the best of our ability as well, I think is very important for as a government service, if you will. So, but in Roseburg, we're lucky that Compass, the local mental health provider here, which is state funded, they have created a grant, and the city of Roseburg's in now, I think it'll be starting into the third and final year of that grant, to have a mental health expert available, a mental health crisis response team, almost like an ambulance you can call if you need help or somebody is having some sort of a mental health crisis. And it gives the police department a resource to turn to in the moments when that police officer may or may not be the mental health expert that they need to be in that moment. And the model and the idea is very helpful. And it would be even better if we had homeless advocates that potentially could go with the police and watch. And because of lawsuits, it is a little bit dicey if you want to say that the same organization that might sue the city for the way they treat a homeless person is now welcome in the cop car with the cop on the road, or maybe to be part of the, but there has to be some blending there. We have to work together on some level, because right now the system that we have just ain't working, or it's producing exactly what it's supposed to produce, depending on the perspective you'd like to take. But so around here, when the conversation comes up about defunding the police, I can say we actually are doing the thing that is claiming would be helpful. In other words, there's mental health assistance for the police when they're on the street, when they're working with people, in order to, in some ways, protect the police too, to be honest, but also to protect that person and to give them the resources that they need, especially in a county where resources are as strapped as they are here for a variety of reasons. And the final thought I had on that was, often now, if you just send the mental health expert out, they don't have police training, so they don't have a law enforcement background. In some cases, they end up calling the police anyway, and so the police end up going there. But I think there's a pretty good argument to be able to say, but wouldn't you like some of these moments and some of these situations to be addressed by an expert who has the resources and can potentially help that person, that it didn't require dispatch to send a police officer off of some other work that they're doing in order to help? And that makes sense to me.
Well, and it's always a balance. I mean, there will be some mistakes, and we should have sent the police first. There's going to be some of that. But on balance, if there's some kind of clear triage, and there is training for the operators and whatever to triage it appropriately, there is training that shows that, yes, you can do it. You can have a high probability of success doing it. And it does leave your police to do policey type stuff, as opposed to going out on these calls, which are very important, but might not require their level of assistance. So there is that. And you mentioned something earlier about blending. I mean, you talked about homeless services with police, but everything is an overlapping, social determinant of health. So just like when we're talking about our current pandemic, we're also talking about a recession. You're not going to solve one without the other. The recession will not be solved without solving the pandemic. The same with this defund the police, for lack of a better phrase. We're not going to solve that without simultaneously solving some of the homeless services, some of the mental health services, some of the physical health services, and some of the economic. Why are they in this homeless situation? Well, it's availability of jobs. It's lack of low-income housing. It's this. And like some of the approaches that we've taken up here are the housing first model, where if you get housing for someone, then you can address the mental health, you can address the joblessness, you can address the physical health. There's things, and that housing first model is kind of the sequencing of it here. Definitely harder to do in a rural setting, but still possible. And so while that might not be a panacea, it's at least a start, but you can't think we're going to solve homelessness without doing everything else in that Venn diagram with all those overlapping needs. So I would not want to be a city councilor in any jurisdiction because that is hard work, but that's the kind of thing you have to weave into every one of your decisions.
No doubt. And there is no automatic easy button to push to solve it all, and it does all overlap. We haven't even touched on addiction as part of the problem, but I'll tell you one thing that I've kind of figured out recently is the effectiveness of one person talking to one person. So I've had success in getting to know a homeless person and asking them what is it they actually need. Like if they really want help, and I think part of the challenge is finding the people who really, really want the help. Now, I also understand that there are people, maybe every single person who's out there wants that help, but some of them are a little bit more open to others, and some of them we figured out how to help maybe better than others. But sometimes there might be a simple solution that requires almost like a college counselor to take their hand, be an advocate, and say, okay, you need an ID, or your social security number isn't correct, and so you can't get your social security every month. Those little things like that, I think, are now that probably sounds like a great solution in a place like Roseburg, where we might have 200 or 300 homeless people in the area, and maybe 500 in the entire county, as opposed to a major metropolitan area where the problem has grown and is very, very large. But that's just me riffing on the concept.
You can't even look at it that way, though, because this whole fiction about the urban-rural divide, the problems are the same, So whether you're talking about 500 homeless people or however many we have here, there's a hassle, to come in to my office. I'm in my office today. I have to step over and walk around. They're all downtown, and because of the pandemic, the city has opted not to, hey, you got to move, you got to go. Everybody is in this kind of hazy middle ground right now where we're all just trying to live and survive through everything. But the problems that you have in Roseburg are the problems we have in Portland, and that they have in Bend, and that they have in Klamath. It's the same problems. Scale is different, but we need to think of these solutions in a way that one size doesn't fit all, but directionally, what can we be doing similarly and learn from each other? We can't be like, oh, that's Portland, I'm not going to take anything from them. And conversely, we do the same thing. Oh, those yokels down in Roseburg. We got to get away from that and just say, what works, let's try it, and let's attune it to what we need. And there's solutions out there, but we got to open our little mindset.
And I get trapped into thinking that it's all going to come back to funding from the state. We just talked about mental health. We just talked about, funding for mental health programs. So if there was mental health support or drug treatment support for our local police officers statewide, the default potentially could be, well, that's the state. The legislature needs to fix that for us because we can't find a way to fix it ourselves because, limited resources, whether you're talking the city police or certainly in Douglas County, the county sheriff's office and operational budgets. Boy, howdy, you want to get into some details on and have a fight, start diving into some of those things. I think default in my mind is, well, hey, legislature, why don't you crank out some money and support some of that mental health backup for our officers?
Well, I agree. And yet we have to live in the realm of the possible. Think about what we thought was possible back in January and what we think is possible now. There was no, oh, yes, we'll have a $4 trillion bailout. We're going to have X number of people on unemployment. We didn't think any of this was possible in our reality, but we've adapted. It's been miserable, and I'm not saying we're in a perfect place, but we need to start saying, number one, we gotta require more from our legislators. I know you're in a tough spot. I know it's limited resources, but this is where we are. So what are you going to do? And how can we help you do it? And then secondly, people have to understand more before they decry, oh, we can't do that and we can't do this and not in my county or whatever. It's like, okay, how is that good for the greater good? We don't talk about shared sacrifice anymore. And I know it's a kind of a hokey thing, but we have to have some kind of shared sacrifice. We have to have some kind of, we don't all have to think alike, but we all live here. So we got to figure out ways to make that work. And even we have to understand that, we're not taxing each other. I'll touch the third rail. I think we need a sales tax in Oregon, but, people, how are we going to pay for the roads and your sheriff and the police and the lights and without some kind of shared input to that, so whether it's a sales tax or something else, I don't want to be taxed extra, but I live here too. And there's a lot of things we can look out of our windows and see we can address, but we got to start talking about it more. And it's not we versus they or us versus them. It is all of us, but a little trite, but I get frustrated with that from time to time.
Right. Yeah. And then the urban rural divide conversation pops in right away, and you start thinking about all kinds of thoughts there. I want to shift a little bit because I want to give you a bit of a platform. You see things through all the different projects and departments and branches of Coalition of Communities of Color all the time. And I'm really curious about what is the biggest, what thought keeps rolling through your head, or what's the biggest thing that you continue to see that's important to you that you want to share or talk about?
Well, again, so many things, but right now I just say maintenance of our wins. If I look back over the last 5 years of the coalition, and I've been here less than 3, but if I look back over the last 5 years of the coalition, we have had successes in getting local jurisdiction stuff like the Portland Clean Energy Fund, where a certain amount of money is going to be taxed, not necessarily from our in-state people, but from national organizations that do business in Oregon retail. But that created about a $50 to $60 million fund in one of our local jurisdictions that can be used for weatherization, solar, historically disadvantaged communities, and cleaning up brownfields, but all environmentally positive things. Or I look at something like the Student Success Act, which it took everyone in the state to help get across the finish line. It took labor, it took business, it took community-based organizations like us. I look at that, and the reason why I said maintenance was because for those two efforts and several others, we're seeing what years and years of work has wrought. It has delivered some relief to historically disadvantaged communities. But now that we are in the middle of this pandemic and economic recession, the first things on the table to get slashed on a state and local government level are those wins. It's like, oh, well, can we slow down and maybe not implement everything we said for the Student Success Act? Oh, can we give businesses a pass because they're so hard hit right now and not pay the tax for a couple of years? That even happened on one of our regional measures. They wanted to delay businesses paying the tax because I think that one was a housing effort because, it's such a tough time for everybody now. And what I would tell people is that business wasn't crying when in 2017, they got a tax windfall from the federal government. Business wasn't crying when from 2009 to the present, they were climbing out of our last recession and making record profits and building up their reserves. So I always tell business, even though I'm sensitive, I'm a small businessman myself before I came here, I'm sensitive to the problems of business, but I want them to recognize they live here. They have a responsibility to the workers and the people that live in the jurisdiction that allowed them to build up those reserves. So I always want, when you ask me that question, I always think of how can I maintain the gains that we have fought for and gotten and not see them all rolled back. It's like FIFO, first in, first out, last in, last out. It's like, oh man, the first thing to go or what everybody fought for, which was only trying to make it even again. So that frustrates me a lot, but I would just say, how can we maintain the wins we have, help everybody get through this period, and then grow from there?
One of the voices in my mind right now, the things that I know that I hear about a lot, and as a small business owner myself, is that pushback of, but don't saddle the businesses with so much that they can't operate. I guess maybe we're talking about a conservative or Republican approach here of less government. Let the businesses thrive, let the businesses succeed. That's how people get employed, and then we can cover some of these other things through hopefully family wage jobs and successful business. And then going back almost to my example of, well, hey, state of Oregon, why don't you, hey, where's that mental health support? Well, like you said, you got to pay into it. Somebody's got to chip in there, but I can hear business owners or anybody watching this saying, yeah, but get off the back of businesses and let us succeed a little bit.
Well, two things there. I'm no economist, but trickle down has never worked. So we were asked to give all these, actually back in 2017, but give business and then they'll reinvest in their workers. Well, that didn't happen. We have very clear, before the pandemic, we have very clear evidence that they were given those tax breaks and they did not funnel it into their labor, into their employees. So that's one thing. And the second thing is that business wants a break, but they don't want to be responsible sometimes. So that's why the whole package, which, by the way, would help the state of Oregon, were to come to the local jurisdictions and to the individual people here. It's being held up because of the business doesn't want to have any liability for anything that goes bad related to the pandemic. Just do your job, treat your employees fairly, and you won't have to worry about you won't be sued because you'll be following the rules as prescribed. So when I hear those things from business, I'm not a business basher. I'm a business lover. Business hires people that look like me. Business, the better environment there is for business in Oregon, the better for everybody. So I'm very pro-business. But as I said before with the taxes, it's like business has a responsibility. They must show up. So I don't want carve-outs for business on liability. I want them to run a clean, honest business where they're responsible. I don't believe yet, I'm waiting to be convinced, but I don't believe that trickle down will work and that they need standards and things they have to be held accountable for. If we give you this tax break, airlines or manufacturer, whatever, you must put X percentage into your employees. You must guarantee something. But they went out of their way to make sure there were no guarantees, and they gave it to their shareholders. Again, I understand the shareholders want to make money, but that's not good for the longevity of your employees.
Well, that's great conversation, and it's a kind of conversation that hopefully, with some understanding, can help more people to understand both sides of that, and having the conversation this way instead of through sound bites or throwing stones at one another.
Economics matters to me because the lowest people on the totem pole almost always are people of color. They're the entry-level people. They're the less educated people. They're the most discriminated against people. So that's why it really matters to me and my organizations. Mm-hmm. I'm no economic policy, but I have eyes and ears, and I see what happens.
We have, yeah, and okay. I'm glad that you went there with that because what I gave you is my take, and then you go, okay, so what is it like to be in a community of color and hear what I just said? And I can pick up on threads of different arguments that I've heard about minimum wage and these kinds of things. But for me, when it stops being my opinion is when I look and I say, tell me the story of an African-American person and the way that this impacts them. Like, your reality really impacts my opinion of a variety of topics. And so I think it's to look at it through that lens, I think is really important. I think that's maybe, if there's been a change with me, that's where it is. Because when I hear somebody say, and a conversation that I guess literally changed me was when an African-American woman friend of mine from Portland said she would never stop in Roseburg. Like, she doesn't feel safe here. Then my opinion of racism or historic events in Oregon no longer matters, in my opinion, because that's her reality. So I probably can't have much deeper of a conversation around economics in the state of Oregon and business contributions to some of the things we talked about, but I definitely understand when somebody says, yeah, but this is how that affects me, and there are people in Oregon living this certain way, and at some point you have to stop and say, okay, well, how can we make that better? How can we help? Or what's our role, at least, and at least just giving somebody a voice or hearing their experience and then trying to adjust what I do on a daily basis.
Well, even when people always talk about systemic and institutionalized racism, whatever, one thing that comes to mind is, so state-sponsored systems. There's something called the COVID system at the state of Oregon, and basically, it's the program where if you qualify, you can be a disadvantaged business, an emerging business, a minority business. And they've added categories where women-owned and veterans, which is something they frequently do to dilute the impact to communities of color. They'll add lots more categories. So when you say, well, I'm diverse, I'm a woman-owned business. And true enough, yes, she is diverse because she is a woman-owned business. But that status wasn't what was precluding her from taking advantage of all the opportunities. So, for example, in the COVID system at the state of Oregon, you can apply for these different statuses and get it. But, when it was minorities, then they were getting more contracts, they were getting more things, they were getting opportunities, they were growing their business because they had a slight edge, or at least it was considered when they applied for a program. But then they expanded it and said women-owned could join that category. We deal with a lot of construction people. So, for example, a lot of the construction firms miraculously overnight became women-owned firms. The husbands put the firms 51% in their wives' names, and then they started going after the bids. And because they were now woman-owned, they became, just as lucrative, if not more so, and were getting the contracts. And every time a new category gets added to those, whether it was veterans, I respect the veterans. There's veterans in my family. I'm not one. I respect women. There's women in my family. My mother was a woman. There's all sorts of things that I can respect, but I can also see how it affects those people for something that should be open to everybody. These are state contracts, which means all of our taxes are paying for that equal opportunity. And yet, even in systems that are supposed to be fair and balanced and uplifting those people, they get punished in those systems. And you can do that just by looking at the percentage of contracts given to each one of those categories. Women were joined later. Veterans were joined later, and yet they have the biggest chunks of those set-asides or those access to those programs at the state of Oregon, which is all of our government. And again, every time you can pull one example like that, you can pull 50. And so if you're always constantly dealing with it, then sometimes our contractors won't even apply for a job. The fix is in. That's going to go to this company. You are disincentivized, and then it's a double-edged sword, because then they'll come back and say, well, you didn't even apply. Why don't you apply? But if you've applied 10 times for the same kind of thing, and you're an engineering company, you're a contracting company, you can deliver those services, but you never get it, and it goes to the same 3 firms, then you take yourself out of the process. So there's some real life things like that, and there's some systemic things that you can't quite quantify, and that's the other thing. What the state will do, if only we had a disparity study. So sometimes they can't make even an administrative decision without a formal disparity study, which a good disparity study might take 1 year, 2 years. It's only for one section, and it can't get extrapolated through all the state agencies. So there are a lot of tricks in the system which uneven the playing field. And if you're a contractor of color or a business person of color, that's just another hurdle that you have to deal with. You deal with it because you want to be in business, but again, it shouldn't be that way. And you're constantly dealing with it, and yet people on the outside, in the majority, are saying, what is their problem? Why don't they just apply? Why don't they just do it? They whine too much. And it's like different life experiences teach you different things.
So what do we do?
Every time you build a system that is supposed to help somebody You have to have compliance and controls and monitoring. A lot of these systems, they look good on paper, they're wonderful on the website, but there's no monitoring, there's no penalty if you don't do it. A lot of the builders here in the Portland area at one point were required, when they did a housing development, to have 30% low-income housing, or to have 20% people in the construction companies be people of color or women. When they ignored it, there was no penalty. And, I've never heard of anything where you can, if you don't enforce anything, if you tell these $1 million developers or business owners that you can make $100 million on this project, or you can follow the rules and make $80 million on this project, they'll follow the rules. They'll do what they have to do because they still want the 80 million, which is still a great profit. But if you tell them, well, we have these rules, but we're not going to enforce them, then they'll keep the 100 million and say, I'll pay a few fines or something like that. Every time you build a system, what is the thing that's going to make it work? And again, we can't live in a society where everything is punitive and you must do this. But if I go too fast on the highway, I get a ticket. If I don't wear my seatbelt, I get a ticket. If I don't pay my taxes, I get evicted. People act like, oh, we can't have those controls. Yes, we can. We live in the real world. We're contributing to society. We can do that. But I just think if we have more systems that monitor and contract, again, some will get away with it. Not everybody gets audited by the IRS. But if you go crazy, you can be audited, and there'll be a cause and effect. So I just wish there were more controls. But I used to be a compliance officer for a health system, so I believe in compliance and following the rules. But
boy, I bet that's its own conversation. I'm sure you've probably seen a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Just to put a bow on this, I just wanted to see if you had anything else that you wanted to make sure you said today, having the ear of, a few people that get to see this podcast. Is there anything I left out or a point you want to make or anything?
I just want people to remember that we're in the middle of multiple pandemics. The pandemic with COVID-19, the recession, the George Floyd-driven racial strife pandemic, the misinformation and willful ignorance pandemic. That one's out of control. Even the fires. We all lived through the fires in here. My heart goes out to people that live in jurisdictions like yours where you actually had with the fires. All we got was the smoke, and that was bad enough. So we're going through these multiple pandemics right now, and people forget we're all going through it. And the only way we're going to find our way, wiggle our way out of it, is if we all go through the solutions and have a lot more of these conversations. I don't mind if someone thinks differently from me or has a different opinion. I don't even mind when they argue with me if they're making logical, reasoned arguments. As I think I told you when we had talked before, my mind has been changed by having a conversation with someone who didn't think like me. I overlooked a lot of stuff, or I hadn't looked at it from their perspective. And even though I think I'm brilliant and always right, I did learn from the conversations with other folks. But I reached the point where in some of my conversations, I can't have a logical conversation with people that used to be my good, conservative, Southern Oregon friends, because the fact basis, it's like skew lines. It's a disconnect. We can't even agree on the facts. And that's psychotic to me. That is infuriating and psychotic and unnecessary. So I like this conversation. I think one of our ways out of this is to have these conversations. If I believe strongly enough in what I believe, I should be able to defend it in a logical, strategic thinking way. And if I can't do that, then I need to rethink. If I can't blow away your arguments, then I need to rethink what I'm talking about or find some more facts. And I think if we all take that approach, it's like, convince me, but you're not convincing me because I have a stronger argument. I love that. But just to say, I'm telling you, every time we get into an impasse, well, he was worse. That is not the end of the argument to me. That is a dodge. And so let's have more of these conversations, and I welcome them. From anybody, I welcome them.
Yeah. Well, I've appreciated the time you and I've gotten to spend together, and I hope we get to connect again. I want to make sure everybody's aware of your organization, communities, or it's not your organization, the organization that you're the executive director for, which is Coalition for Communities of Color. Also, you were ALF Class, I wanted to say 30, but I'm not sure. If I got that.
I'm long in the tooth. I was ALF Class 23.
ALF Class 23.
Way back.
All right. Well, hey,
with the great Roseburg partner, Joyce Axie.
Yes, and we still communicate here in Roseburg on the occasion, or we have Douglas County. We're kind of scattered out, but we connect every Tuesday afternoon and kind of check in with one another, and so that's pretty great, and we stay connected, and that's fun. And so you can learn more at alforegon.org if you want to learn more about ALF, the American Leadership Forum. Jason Lim is commenting on Facebook saying he's class 23.
Yes.
So, yeah, 23.
That's right.
It's cool. The ALF network's pretty great. So if you want to learn more about ALF.
We were the most diverse class at the time. I don't know if anybody has beaten our record, but we were the most diverse class, and some would say the most troublesome. But either way, I'm okay.
I love it because everybody says, "Oh, well, we were the best class," and the ALF people go, "Yes, you were." Pat you on the head. Yeah, right. Everybody.
You don't say that in 23. It would be redundant for us to say it.
Ooh. Okay. And then also, as a little side project, my family and I have started a thing called speakupwithus.com where we sell t-shirts like this one, and with an effort to try and create some conversations around like the ones that you and I have just had. And we're going to send you a t-shirt from speakupwithus.com, and we're hoping that other people will also go there and purchase a shirt. The revenue from that process and that little website's going to send money to the Black United Fund of Portland, which we're happy to support. So get shirts at speakupwithus.com. So hang on the line here for just a second, Marcus, while I wrap up, and then we'll chat again for just a minute, and I'll get your shirt size and stuff like that. So thanks again to Marcus Mundy for being on the program today. Interrupting Racism is a partnered project with the American Leadership Forum of Oregon. Like we said, you can go to alforegon.org to learn more about that. We appreciate the comments that come here and hope that a lot of people get to see these. So please share these episodes from YouTube or Facebook and see if we can get the conversation going. These kinds of talks are important, and they are enjoyable, and just hopefully more people can strike up conversations between people that they may or may not know or don't look like them, and find out what perspectives they have in this world that we're living in. So once again, thanks for being with us here on Interrupting Racism. We'll see you again next time.